It was a typical Wednesday morning, just like any other. The sun had barely risen, casting a warm glow through the windshield as I drove down the empty highway. The truck hummed beneath me, the road stretching out endlessly ahead.
There's something.
About the open road that feels like freedom? After years behind the wheel, I had grown used to the rhythm of it. The quiet solitude of being on the move. That's when the phone rang. A familiar number flashed on the screen. It was Kevin, my new boss. I had been expecting a call for a few days now, maybe an update on a delivery, maybe even a check-in about upcoming routes. But this call, it was different, I could tell just. By looking at the screen, I answered with a casual, "Hey Kevin, what's up?" His voice on the other end was colder than usual. "I need you to pull over," he said. "We need to talk." My heart sank. Something in his tone told me this wasn't just about business. I pulled the truck off to the side of the road, my stomach tightening. What could this be about? The company had been doing well. We had met every target, kept the deliveries on time, and even exceeded expectations. But Kevin had only been with us for a few months. We hadn't had many conversations. But I had always been loyal, always gone above and beyond. Something didn't feel right. "All right," I said, trying to keep the unease from my voice. I'm stopped. "What's going on?" There was a long pause before Kevin spoke again. "I've been going over some numbers, and it's become clear that we need to make some changes. We've got to cut costs. And unfortunately, that means letting you go." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me, crushing me. "Wait, what?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "You're firing me?" "I've been with this company for years. Always done my job." "Well, I've never missed a delivery. What's going on?" Kevin's tone remained flat. "I understand that, but it's a cost-saving decision. We've looked at all options, and you're just not a good fit for the direction we're going in." I couldn't process what he was saying. My mind raced. Cost-saving? I'd worked long hours, made sure every delivery was handled with care, kept the trucks in top shape, and had never once gotten a complaint. How could it be that I was now being let go after all the hard work I'd put in? "Kevin, you've got to be kidding," I said, my voice starting to rise with frustration. "I've been loyal to this company for years. I've given everything. To this job, how's this happening?" "I'm sorry," Kevin said, his voice getting sharper, "but it's done. The decision is final. I'll send over the paperwork, and you'll get your severance pay in a few days." I felt the blood drain from my face. Severance pay. That was all they were offering after everything I'd done. This was how they were thanking me. "Don't understand you're firing me just like that, after everything I've done for this company? This is insane," I muttered, the words catching in my throat. Kevin's tone remained cold and detached. "I know it's hard, but this is a business decision. There's nothing more to discuss. I'm sorry." With that, the phone call ended. I sat there in the truck, staring at the empty road ahead. It felt like everything I had worked for had just been ripped out from under me. What had I done wrong? I had given everything to this job, and now I was being let go without any explanation. Without any regard for my years of loyalty, I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the words still hanging in the air. Cost-saving. Those two words kept repeating in my mind, and yet none of it made sense. I had been a part of the company for so long, had worked so hard to keep things running smoothly, and this is how it ended. I stared down at the phone. In my hand, my fingers trembling. How could this happen? As I sat there in the truck, the engine turned off, and the road stretching endlessly ahead of me. I couldn't help but think back to the beginning before all of this. When I first started with the company, it was like any other job. I had no idea how much of my life it would come to consume. But over the years, it became more than just a job. It became a part of me. I had spent countless hours on the road, driving through endless stretches of highway, hauling goods from one city to the next. The early mornings blurred into late nights, the hum of the truck becoming a constant companion. I'd seen sunrises that painted the sky in shades of pink and gold and sunsets that seemed to go on forever. There were long stretches of solitude, but there was a certain peace in it, a sense of freedom, a feeling that I was part of something bigger. The open road was my escape. It was where I found my rhythm. I remember the first few months when I joined the company. The work was tough, but it was rewarding. There was something satisfying about being on the road, knowing that you were contributing to something important. Every mile I drove, every delivery I made, felt like an accomplishment. I could feel the pride in my work. The company, at first, felt like a family. The camaraderie among the drivers, the respect we had for each other's work, it made the long hours worthwhile. We all had stories tales from the road, mishaps, close calls, moments of humor to keep the mood light. The other drivers became my friends, my crew, and we looked out for each other. Whether it was covering for each other on long hauls, offering advice on the best rest stops, or just checking in during tough stretches, it was a bond we shared. Then, a few months ago, everything changed. The company was taken over by a new management team. Jack, the new boss, stepped in with big promises of change, of growth, of streamlining the business to make things more efficient. At first, I was excited, finally, someone who would bring new energy, fresh ideas, and maybe even better benefits for the crew. We all felt the same way. Maybe this was the turning point, we thought. Things were going to improve at the beginning. Jack seemed approachable, sat down with the drivers, listened to our concerns, and shared his vision for the future. We were all in this together, he said. The company was going to become more organized, more profitable, and everyone was going to benefit. For the first time in a while, we felt like we had a leader who cared about us. I thought to myself, this is it. The company is on the up and up, but somewhere along the way, things began to change. Slowly, little by little, the focus shifted. From building a stronger, more connected team to maximizing profits, cutting corners, and squeezing every last ounce of efficiency out of the workforce. The camaraderie I had once felt seemed to dissipate, replaced by tension. The trust we had in management started to erode. It wasn't long before we saw Jack's true approach, cost-saving measures, cutting back on driver incentives, and pushing the limits of what we could do before they started taking shortcuts. And then I began to notice a shift in Jack's behavior toward me. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. He would make little comments, suggesting that my efficiency could be improved or that I wasn't moving fast enough.
Oh, but there was.
No reason for it. My record spoke for itself, had consistently delivered on time, and I had done everything I was asked with no complaints. I was proud of my work, proud of the team. But somehow that didn't matter to him anymore. As the weeks passed, Jack became more detached, more impersonal. I remember a meeting we had where he discussed his new cost-saving initiative layoffs. Tighter schedules, fewer hours. I saw the looks exchanged among my coworkers. Everyone was nervous. The morale in the office dropped, and the solidarity we once shared as a team started to fade. I couldn't help but feel like something was wrong. The work environment that had once been full of support and respect had become tense, competitive, and cold. Every conversation with Jack felt more transactional than personal, like I was just another cog in the machine. I thought it was just the stress of the transition that things would eventually balance out. But the changes kept coming, and soon. It was clear Jack wasn't interested in maintaining what we had built. He was more interested in making the numbers work for him regardless of what it cost. As I reflect on it now, I realize how blind I was to the signs. I had dedicated myself to the company, poured my energy into every haul, every mile driven, because I believed in the work and the people I worked with. But somewhere along the way, my loyalty didn't matter anymore. The company had become a machine, and Jack was at the helm. Focused on the bottom line, I thought back to all those late-night hauls, the long stretches of road where I had nothing but my thoughts, my truck, and the open highway. I remembered the pride I felt each time I made a delivery on time, the small victories that kept me going. But now, as I sat here, that pride felt like a distant memory. Everything had changed, and I didn't even see it coming. The weeks that followed, the phone call with Kevin, were a blur. At first, I tried to keep my head down, focused on getting back on the road and moving forward. But it wasn't the same anymore. The tension in the air was palpable, even though no one said anything outright. It started with small changes. Began introducing new cost-cutting measures that seemed harmless at first, more efficient routes. fewer maintenance checks on trucks. But soon, those small changes began to feel like big sacrifices. It wasn't just the fleet that was affected. It was the team, the heart of everything we did. The mood in the office began to shift. Where we once gathered to laugh and share stories from the road, now the conversations were tense and filled with uncertainty. Drivers used to talk about the long hauls, the camaraderie we shared on trips, and the satisfaction of a job well done. But now, the conversations were about time cuts, fewer loads, and how much the company was really cutting back. The vibe was off, like everyone was walking on eggshells, trying to avoid the next cost-saving measure that would come down from the top. And then came the meeting. Kevin called us all in for a team-wide update. When we gathered in the break room, he stood at the front, looking at each of us like we were just numbers to him, like we weren't the team who had made this company successful in the first place. "We need to make some serious changes, Kevin." Started, his voice flat and controlled. "Our goal is simple. Cut costs, maximize profits. We're looking at every aspect of the business to make it more efficient. That means less overhead and fewer resources allocated to the drivers. We need to focus on profitability." The words hit me like a slap. Profitability? Was this really happening? Hadn't we just had the best quarter in company history? Now, it felt like everything we had worked for was being erased, reduced to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. The room grew quiet as Kevin continued. "From now on, we're cutting back on route times, reducing maintenance on trucks, and limiting overtime. I expect all of you to adjust to these changes immediately." I could feel the heat rise in my chest. The room, once filled with the buzz of anticipation and pride, now felt cold. I looked around at the faces of my coworkers. Some of them were nodding, but I could see it in their eyes. They were all as confused and upset as I was. How could Kevin not see the bigger picture? As the meeting dragged on, I found myself zoning out. It wasn't just the cost-saving measures. It was the way Kevin was talking, the way he held himself, the way he distanced himself from the people who had gotten him here. It was as though the human element had been stripped away, replaced by a sterile focus on efficiency. Every time he said cut costs, it felt like he was cutting us, the drivers, the people who made everything work. I had always prided myself on my work ethic. We worked hard because we believed in the job. We believed in the company. But now, Kevin's priorities were clear. The people didn't matter as much as the profits. By the end of the meeting, the unease in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I walked out of that meeting with a pit in my stomach, trying to make sense of the shift that had taken place. Kevin had always seemed approachable, seemed like he cared. But now he seemed like just another corporate executive trying to balance a spreadsheet, ignoring the lives that were affected by his decisions. I sat in my truck, the engine idling, my mind racing. What had changed? The man I had trusted, the man who had promised change and improvement, was becoming someone I didn't recognize. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the truth. Things were changing, all right, but not for the better. I had been with the company for years. Through the highs and lows, the late nights, the long hours, and the endless miles on the road, I had always given my best, and for the most part, I thought that would be enough, that loyalty and hard work would be recognized. But when Kevin called me into his office that afternoon, I knew something had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't going to be a simple meeting. I walked into his office, trying to steady my breath, but the pit in my stomach was growing deeper with each step. Kevin was sitting at his desk, looking at his computer screen, not even acknowledging me as I entered. I closed the door behind me, feeling the weight of the moment pressing in on me. "Sit down," said, barely glancing up. I sat across from him, my mind racing. I had just completed another successful haul the day before on time, as usual. There had been no issues with my deliveries, no problems with my performance. So why was I here? What had changed? "I've been reviewing the numbers, Kevin," began, finally turning his attention to me, his voice cold and flat. "And it's clear that we need to make some cuts. It's just business, nothing personal." I felt my chest tighten. "What do you mean, cuts?" "We're doing better than ever, Kevin. The team's performance has been solid. I've been doing everything I can to help out. Kevin sighed, like he was tired of hearing the same things over and over. I understand that. But the reality is, the company's expenses are too high. We've got to make tough decisions to stay profitable. That means letting some people go. My heart sank. I had heard rumors about cost-saving measures, but I never thought it would be me. Not after all the time I had put in, not after everything I had done to keep the wheels turning. It didn't make sense. I had always been a top performer, had never caused trouble. And now, here I was, sitting across from a man who was telling me my loyalty didn't matter. I'm sorry. This is how it has to be, Kevin continued, not even flinching. You're being let go. Can't afford to keep everyone, and your position is no longer necessary. What? I blurted out, unable to hold back the shock and disbelief. You're firing me? After everything I've done? After all the years I've been here? Kevin's gaze didn't soften. His face was unreadable, like he had made up his mind and there was no going back. It's a business decision, he repeated, as if that made it all make sense. We have to prioritize efficiency and profitability. You've been a good driver, but there are other ways to cut costs. The words felt like a slap. Good driver? I've been loyal. I've worked my ass off for this company. And now you're telling me that all of that means nothing? Kevin looked away briefly, his fingers tapping on the desk. He was so calm, so indifferent that it almost made it worse. It's not personal, he said again, his voice cold. We're just making adjustments. You'll get your severance pay, and we'll send the paperwork over to you. The room spun. I wanted to yell, to ask how this was possible, to demand some sort of explanation that made sense. But I couldn't find the words. I felt betrayed in the worst possible way. Here was a man I had respected, a man who had promised improvement, and now he was pulling the rug out from under me. No warning, no gratitude, just the cold reality of a decision that felt like it was based on anything but merit. I reached for the termination letter he handed me, my hands trembling. My eyes scanned the words, but they didn't seem real. Had worked my whole life for this company. I had sacrificed time with my family, worked through the holidays, striven through weather conditions that should have kept me off the road, and this was how it ended. I stared at the paper, the words blurring in front of me. Business decision, cut costs, maximize efficiency. It all felt like a lie. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice breaking. You can't just do this. You can't just throw away all the hard work we've put in. All the trust we've built. But Kevin didn't even look at me. He was already turning back to his computer screen like the conversation was over. I'm sorry, he said, almost dismissively. It's final. Stood up, numbed the termination. Letters still in my hands. I felt my legs shake beneath me, my mind racing, unable to process the depth of what had just happened. I couldn't look at Kevin anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with him. Without another word, I turned and walked out of his office, the door clicking shut behind me. As I made my way down the hallway, it hit me. This was betrayal. Not just a loss of a job, but a loss of trust, a loss of everything I had worked for. And as I stepped outside into the parking lot, the cold air hit my face, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was how someone I had trusted, someone I had worked so hard for, had just discarded me like I was nothing, and I didn't know how to process it. I walked out of the office in a daze. The cool breeze hit my face as I stepped into the parking lot, but it felt like I was walking through a fog. Every step was heavy, like the weight of the world was bearing down on me. The termination letter still clutched in my hand felt like a foreign object, something that didn't belong to me. But it was real. It was final. I couldn't escape it. I glanced back at the office building where, just yesterday, everything had felt normal, where I had worked for years, building relationships, delivering results, and doing everything I could to keep the company running smoothly. And now I felt like a ghost. The building that had once been filled with camaraderie, shared goals, and late-night conversations now felt cold and distant. The doors I had walked through every day no longer felt like they were meant for me. I stood in the parking lot, staring at the windows of the building, feeling the loss settle deep inside me. How could this happen? I kept asking myself. Given everything I've worked tirelessly to help this company succeed, and this is how they repay me? The more I thought about it, the more the anger boiled up inside me, but it was different this time. It wasn't the kind of anger I could CHNNEL into action. It was an emptiness, a hollow feeling in my chest that left me speechless. As I stood there, the world around me felt like it was moving in slow motion. The cars in the lot, the trucks driving by, everything felt distant, like I was no longer part of it, and that hurt more than anything. The company that had been my life for so many years now felt like a stranger, a place I didn't recognize anymore. I looked at the trucks parked in the lot, the ones I had driven countless miles in. I had spent so many hours in those vehicles, so much time away from home, from my family, all for the company. For what? To be let go over a cost-cutting decision? My heart was heavy with frustration and confusion. How had this happened? How had someone I had trusted, someone who had seemed so promising in the beginning, turned into someone who could just throw me away like I didn't matter? It didn't make sense. I had been a top performer. I'd gone above and beyond, too. Make sure that every delivery was on time, that every truck was in perfect condition, that the company stayed in good standing with its clients. And this was how it ended. I walked slowly to my truck, feeling like I was moving through quicksand. The familiar interior of the cab didn't bring me any comfort. It was just another reminder of the life I had built, only to have it ripped away in an instant. As I climbed into the truck, stared at the steering wheel for a moment, my hands resting on it, unsure of what to do next. Where do I go from here? I thought. The company I had dedicated myself to was gone, and with it, my sense of purpose. My identity had been so wrapped up in my job, in the work I did, that without it, I felt lost. Like I didn't know who I was anymore. I started the engine, and pulled out of the lot, my mind racing. The company, the people, the work I had done, it was all behind me now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that everything I had worked for was gone, and I was standing on the edge of an unknown future. The road ahead stretched out before me, but it felt like a different road than the one I had been on before. I wasn't sure where it would take me. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't know where I was headed. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so utterly alone. The apartment, once a place of comfort after long days on the road, now felt suffocating. The walls, which used to be familiar and warm, felt cold and unwelcoming. The only light in the room came from the soft glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. The silence was deafening. I sat on the couch. The firing letter still crumpled in my hands, its edges sharp against my fingers. It felt like a weight I couldn't shake off. How did it come to this? Kept asking myself over and over, as if somehow the answer would appear. The words in the letter, the same ones Kevin had said to me, still rang in my ears. We've got to make cuts. You're just not a good fit anymore. It's not a good fit. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of it. I had been more than a good fit. I'd been a loyal employee, one of the best. I had poured my time, my energy, and my life into the company, and this was how I was repaid. I stared at the letter again, the words blurred by the sting in my eyes. I had been fired. Just like that. No warning, no appreciation for my years of hard work. It's just a cold, impersonal decision. I couldn't process it. I had given everything to this job, and now I was nothing more than an afterthought. The feeling of betrayal gnawed at me, eating away at whatever sense of peace I had left. I got up from the couch and paced across the room, my mind racing. The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet, like I was walking through a dream, a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I was angry, so angry at Kevin, at the company, at myself for trusting them. But more than that, I was hurt. It was a pain I hadn't expected. It's a kind of pain that comes from realizing you've been discarded, like you never mattered. Like all those years of hard work, all the sacrifices I'd made, meant nothing. I felt the tears well up, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't. I had always been the strong one, the one who kept it together, no matter how hard things got. But right now I felt like I was falling apart. I sat back down on the couch, my hands shaking as I rubbed my face. The emptiness in my chest was overwhelming. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from here. My job had defined me for so long. It had given me purpose. And now I was left with nothing. The future seemed like a void, an endless expanse of uncertainty. Every path I tried to picture led to a dead end. The clock on the wall ticked loud. In the silence of the room, each second felt like an eternity. I had tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me. Thoughts swirled around in my head, memories of the good times, the long nights on the road, the satisfaction of a job well done. But those memories now felt like they belonged to someone else. I couldn't remember when things had started to fall apart. Was it when Kevin came in and started making changes? Was it the moment he decided that profits were more important than the people who had made the company what it was? I didn't know. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted long before I was ever let go. I pulled the blanket from the back of the couch, wrapping it around me like it might offer some comfort, but it didn't. I was cold not just physically, but inside. Cold in a way I hadn't been before. Alone. I sat there in the dark, staring at the blank television screen, my mind consumed by thoughts of what had happened and what was going to happen next. I had never been the type to just give up, but this felt like more than just losing a job. Felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know who I was without this job, without the road, without the people I had worked alongside for so long. And as I sat there, the weight of it all crushing me, I finally let the tears fall. They came in waves, like a dam breaking open. All the frustration, the confusion, the hurt, it all poured out. And I couldn't stop it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what to do next. I felt like I was drowning and I couldn't catch my breath. But I also knew something. I couldn't stay here forever. I couldn't let this break me, no matter how much it hurt. I had to find a way to pick up the pieces. I had to figure out who I was without this job. But right now, in this moment, I didn't have the strength to think about that. All I could do was sit in the dark, consumed by the weight of it all, and try to hold on. It had been a few days since the breakdown. The initial shock had faded, but the emptiness lingered. I had spent most of those days in a haze staring at the walls of my apartment, replaying the events over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of the mess my life had suddenly become. But there comes a point when you can't just stay in the darkness forever. You have to face reality, no matter how painful it is. I woke up that morning with a different feeling, a sense of resignation, maybe even a little clarity. I didn't have the luxury of time to wallow anymore. If I didn't act soon, I was going to lose even more than I already had. I couldn't let myself drown in the anger, the confusion, and the hurt. I had to move forward. But where do you go when everything you thought you knew has been turned upside down? I took the first step that day by picking up the phone. It felt like a monumental task, dialing the number of a recruitment agency, setting up that first meeting. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the start of something new. Maybe there was a way out of this hole I was in when I walked into the recruiter's office. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me again. I wasn't the confident, driven person I had been a week ago, but I was here. Had to make this work. The recruiter, a woman in her mid-30s, was short. Brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude, shook my hand as I sat down across from her. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She asked about my work experience, why I was looking for a new position, and what I was hoping to achieve. I told her everything the years I had spent with the trucking company, how I had always done my job well, and how suddenly, without warning, I was let go. She nodded, jotting down notes as I spoke. The market is competitive, she said, her voice calm but direct. But you've got skills that are in demand. You're a hard worker, and that counts for a lot in this industry. Her words didn't make everything feel better, but they did give me a little reassurance. It wasn't over. I wasn't done yet. There were still opportunities out there, and I was still capable of finding them. After the meeting, I went home and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I didn't have much of a plan, just the vague hope that I could get back on my feet. I started browsing job listings, sending out resumes, and reaching out to old contacts in the industry. The words I typed felt mechanical at first, but as the hours passed, something began to shift within me. I wasn't just sending out applications anymore. I was fighting. I was fighting for my future, fighting to get back the confidence I had lost. Each resume I sent out felt like a small victory. I wasn't just sitting there waiting for the world to tell me what to do. I was taking control, and that was something I hadn't felt in days. But the process wasn't easy. The job market was tough, and as I waited for responses, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness wash over me. The company I had worked for had been my whole life. It was hard to let go of the idea that I could go back, that things could go back to the way they were. But the more I worked on getting my resume out there, the more I realized something. I had to let go. As the days passed, the sadness didn't disappear, but it didn't consume me either. I started to feel like I was moving towards something better, even if I couldn't see it yet. And with every conversation I had, whether it was with recruiters or former coworkers, there was a growing sense that this was the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of the story. I sat at my desk one night reviewing a job listing that seemed like a good fit. I paused, staring at the screen, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel a sense of clarity. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't alone. I wasn't stuck. I could still build something new. I took a deep breath, made the call, scheduled an interview for the following week. I couldn't let it go any longer. I had tried to move on, tried to pick up the pieces of my life, but the questions kept eating away at me. Why? Why was I fired when I had done everything they asked of me? Why had Kevin, someone I once thought of as a leader, cast me aside so easily? I had done everything right, and I wasn't going to leave without answers. So I made the decision to confront Kevin. I walked into the office building that morning, my mind set. The sound of my boots echoing in the hallway was the only thing I could hear. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no turning back. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, with treating me like I was expendable. Stood outside his office for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had to do it. When I entered, Kevin was sitting at his desk, his back turned toward me as he spoke on the phone. I waited until he hung up before I spoke. "Kevin," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." He turned to face me, his expression neutral. "What is it, protagonist's name? What is it?" I repeated, the frustration bubbling up in my chest. "You fired me? You took away everything I worked for, everything I sacrificed, and you're just going to act like it's no big deal? Like I don't deserve an explanation?" Kevin leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "It's a business decision. I've already explained this to you. We needed to make cuts. It wasn't personal. It's not personal." I snapped, anger rising in my voice. I dedicated years to this company. I was loyal. I gave everything I had. And you're telling me this wasn't personal? Kevin sighed, his patience clearly thinning, making this more complicated than it needs to be. "You weren't a good fit for what the company needs now. It's as simple as that." I shook my head, my chest tightening with disbelief. "That's it? After everything I've done for this company, that's all you've got? You're firing me for being not a good fit?" Kevin remained calm, leaning forward slightly, his fingers drumming on the desk. "I don't know what you want me to say. I've already made my decision." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. That was it. This was how my years of service were being acknowledged. No appreciation, no explanation, just an impersonal decision with no regard for the years I had spent pouring my time and energy into this company. "No, this isn't right." My voice shook with the rawness of it. "I deserve more than this. I deserve an explanation. How could you just toss me aside after all I've done, after everything I've sacrificed?" Kevin's expression didn't change. "I've already told you everything. This isn't about you personally. It's about the direction the company's going. We've got to streamline things. We have to prioritize efficiency." Efficiency. That's what this is about? I could feel the anger swelling up inside me again, boiling over. I've been efficient. I've worked my ass off to make sure everything ran smoothly. But none of that matters to you, does it? All you care about is cutting costs no matter what it costs me, no matter what it costs the rest of the team. Kevin stood up, his body tense, his voice now sharp. You're not going to get anything more out of me. I've made my decision, and that's final. I could feel the frustration rising to a boiling point. I wanted to scream, to demand that he see the damage he was doing not just to me, but to the team we had worked so hard to build. But I knew it wouldn't do any good. I wasn't going to get the answers I needed, not from him. I stood up, my fists clenched, the anger still coursing through my veins. You're making a huge mistake, Kevin, I said, my voice low but filled with determination. But you won't. Hear me now. I'll let you enjoy this victory. But when it all falls apart, I hope you remember what you've done. Kevin didn't respond. His eyes were cold, his posture indifferent. He wasn't even looking at me anymore, already dismissing me as though I was nothing. I turned to leave, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I was more determined than ever. I didn't have closure. I didn't have the answers I wanted. But I had something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was done. I'd move forward, with or without Kevin's approval. As I walked out of his office, I could feel the heavy weight of the decision in my chest. But as I made my way down the hallway, there was a shift within me. I wasn't going to be defined by this. I wasn't going to let Kevin's betrayal break me. I walked out of the building, stepping into the parking lot, the cold air hitting my face. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. Kevin had done what he thought was necessary for his company, but it was clear now he had no idea what he was doing. I would rebuild. I would find something better when it came time. I would be the one who walked away on my terms. The days after the confrontation with Kevin felt like they stretched on forever, but something shifted within me, almost imperceptibly, as I started to pull myself back together. It wasn't easy. The hurt, the confusion, it still lingered, but I knew deep down that I couldn't stay in that dark place forever. I had to find a way forward. I had to start healing. I signed up at the gym. At first, it felt like a mechanical decision, just another thing to check off my list. But when I walked into that gym for the first time, the sound of weights clanking, the steady beat of music in the background, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just the physical act of working out. It was the release. Each set, each rep, felt like I was pushing myself out of the hole I had been in, slowly gaining back control. The sweat, the effort, it was something I could focus on, something tangible. I didn't look back as I lifted weights, not just physically, but emotionally. Every time I pressed through another set, it felt like I was shedding the layers of anger and frustration that had built up. It wasn't a quick fix, but with every drop of sweat, I could feel a little more of the heaviness lifting. But it wasn't just about working out. I needed to reconnect with myself outside of the gym, outside of the grind of trying to find a new job. The first weekend after I'd made the decision to take better care of myself, I reached out to some old friends. People I hadn't seen in months, hell, maybe even years. We met for lunch, sat at a table, and talked like nothing had changed. Even though so much had, we laughed, joked, reminisced about the good old days. For a moment, it felt like everything was back to normal. It wasn't just the guy who had been let go, or the guy who had been burned by a company I had trusted. It was just me, myself again, not defined by what had happened, but by who I was. The more I connected with my old friends, the more I realized how much I had shut myself off from those relationships over the past few years. Work had taken over my life, and in the process, I had pushed the people who mattered most to the background. I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't do that anymore. It wasn't just about work. It was about balance, about remembering that life was bigger than one job, one company. I also started doing things I had neglected for too long. I picked up my guitar again, the one I hadn't touched in years. The sound of the strings beneath. My fingers felt soothing. I wasn't a great player, but I didn't need to be. Playing just felt good. It was a reminder that I still had hobbies, passions, things that brought me joy outside of my career. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. The days passed, and with each one, I could feel the weight I had been carrying getting a little lighter. The healing process wasn't easy. there were nights when the anger and sadness crept back in. When the thought of what Kevin had done made me clench my fists in frustration. But they were just moments now, fleeting, passing feelings. They didn't define me anymore. I got a call about an interview or real opportunity. My heart raced as I scheduled it, but this time there was no panic. I wasn't desperate. I was ready. I had rediscovered my confidence, my worth. I had moved on from the anger and heartbreak that had initially clouded my vision. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of that office a few weeks ago. I was stronger, more resilient. I had regained control over my life, not because everything was perfect, but because I had chosen to rise above it, had chosen to heal. I wasn't going to let one setback, one company define me. I was going to rebuild. And with every passing day, I felt that rebuilding taking shape. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden light through the window as I sat by the window of my apartment. The world outside felt calm, steady, the sky stretching out infinitely, just like the possibilities ahead of me. It was a peaceful moment, one that I had longed for during the chaotic weeks after I'd been fired. It was a moment of clarity. I had spent so much time consumed by anger, by the questions I couldn't answer, by the betrayal I had felt. Kevin's actions had left a scar, no doubt. The firing had shaken me, made me question my worth, my contributions, and what I had built over the years. But now, sitting here, looking out at the horizon, I could finally see it clearly. That job, that company, it didn't define me. It never had. I had let it for so long, thinking that my value was tied to the work I did, to the title I held, to the hours I spent on the road. But now I realized something important. I was more than that. I was more than just a position, more than just a job title. The worth I had spent years searching for, years tying to my work, was already inside me. It always had been. The anger that had burned in me for so long had burned out, and in its place was a quiet understanding. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had also learned. I had learned that my strength didn't come from the company or from someone else's decisions. It came from within me. I had the strength to rise above this setback, and I was going to move forward, not as someone who had been broken, but as someone who had been tested and had come out stronger on the other side. The phone rang, and I glanced at the screen. It was a recruiter calling to follow up on the interview I had had last week. My heart raced, but this time I didn't feel the tightness in my chest that I had before. I wasn't desperate anymore. I wasn't looking for validation. I was looking for the right opportunity, the one that would allow me to use everything I had learned, everything I had built, and move forward with purpose. Hi, protagonist's name. This is Sarah from company name. I wanted to tell you that we were very impressed with your interview. We'd like to offer you the position. Are you available to discuss next steps? I smiled, a sense of calm settling over me. This was it, the new chapter. The one that had seemed impossible just a few weeks ago. Thank you, I said, my voice steady and confident. I'd love to discuss the next steps. Da-da-da-da-da. As I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, I realized how far I had come. The road had been tough, but I had learned to embrace the pain and the uncertainty, and I had emerged stronger for it. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of that office a month ago. I'd rebuilt myself. I'd rediscovered who I was. And what truly mattered? I walked over to the window. Looking out at the vast expanse of the city, the sky still glowing in the last light of the day. I felt the wind on my face, the promise of something new, something better. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I stepped into my future, not with fear or regret, but with strength, resilience, and an unwavering belief in myself. The best part of my journey was just beginning.